Hi Shirley. So this is the new premises for the Jessie Street National Women's Library.
Yes.
And this is a lovely poster.
Celebrating, as you see, 15 years.
You were a co-founder, weren't you?
Yes, back in 1989.
It's been such a labour of love, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. It's taken over my life, but I don't regret it.
Okay. So here's Janet.
Yes, this is Janet, who's at reception desk for today. One of our numerous volunteers and the only way we can keep the library going.
Volunteers keep the world revolving, don't they?
Yes, they do. If volunteers gave up, I think the economy would collapse, quite frankly, and so would we.
Hi Suzanne.
Hi.
Shirley's offered to take you on a tour of the library.
Thank
If you'd like
Shirley.
to come round, Suzanne, because
Certainly.
I'm just going to tell Jan about these
Sure.
illuminated addresses. These are really beautiful, and we're very pleased to have them. This is a portrait of Jessie Street that was painted by Gerald Nathan in 1940. It was donated to the library by her second daughter, Philippa, and we're very, very proud of this. It's a lovely portrait, and this is, we feel, is a very fitting place for it. This is another portrait of Jessie. It's a photograph, actually, an enlargement of one that's in the State Library of New South Wales, but that was presented recently, obviously much younger. This is a very small collection. These are books that duplicate what we've already got in the research collection, and it is in fact a loan collection. Any members of the library, anywhere they are in Australia, can borrow these books. Non-fiction right through to fiction, from early women Australian writers up to the ones that are just publishing at the moment.
So can they be sent out? Is that what happens?
Oh yes, we can. I mean, we've got, because we're a national library, we've got members Australia-wide. So if someone sees that this book is held here and they want to borrow and they're a member, they can. We'll send it out, they send it back. This is a photograph that was part of an exhibition put on by the National Library of Australia and the Department of Foreign Affairs. When the exhibition was called Jessie Street and the Foundation of the United Nations. But the actual photograph was presented to the library as part of an exhibition they'd put on for the 50th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, where Jessie was a member. And they had an exhibition of material by Jessie, letters and things like that, and they blew up a lot of photographs and at the end gave us the photographs. This one is particularly interesting. Everyone, especially those who know Sydney, sort of look at it and say, when was it taken, where was it taken, what's this, what's that building, and so on. And this is, as you can see there, the Second Women's Charter Conference held in August 1946, organised by Jessie and other women's organisations. What they were trying to do, it was just after the Second World War, the government was trying to put together a vision of what Australia would be like and what had to be done. And Jessie and women's organisations realised unless they lobbied to have women put into this plan, that they would be left out. And that's what the Charter was doing. This is our work area along here with Janet working, as you can see. That's another of the pictures donated to us, the photographs blown up for the exhibition of the founding of the Jessie Street and the founding of the United Nations. That is particularly interesting because it shows the delegation, the Australian delegation to the conference, with one woman there. Judy Small told me a lovely story about this. she was doing law, and they were doing a session on international law. And the lecturer had this photograph up, and he was going through the names of all the men and their careers, and then looked, and there was a female, and he said, and that was the secretary.
Oh no.
And Judy said, I leapt to my feet and I shouted, and I said, that was not the secretary, that's Jessie Street. Yeah, that's how we become invisible. And he was a lecturer, lecturing about the founding of the United Nations. This is the compactus holding our research collection. There are two parts. There's the non-fiction section, which deals with women and women's issues. All our material that we collect has to be about women. That's the raison d'etre that we take it in. And as well as that, we've got the fiction section, and we concentrate on Australian women writers. So your book will be there, Suzanne. Yes. And if you have a look in here, this is these are copies of the early women writers, and we've been very lucky because a member who was leaving Australia donated all these lovely old editions. Aren't they gorgeous? And here of Mrs. Campbell Pride, and going through to Ethel Turner. But a lot of these books are first editions, and some of them are so rare that the National Library has had to borrow books from us because they have no copy. Really? Jan, you of course had been in the library when we were in Town Hall House area, where the archives had to store things in one place and then work at a table, and everybody walked between them. So Beverly, who is our archivist, is our only paid employee, and she's part-time, now has a space dedicated to the archives, and she thinks this is fabulous. So these are her working archives that she's dealing with at the moment.
What sort of archives do you have? Documents?
Oh yes, documents, papers from women's organisations, you know, the history of them. Little collections, some very interesting ones that might only be about 6 papers altogether.
Yes.
But a lot of our archives are about women. I mean, they're supplied by women, papers and their letters and so on, who've not made history at all. They've just been sort of ordinary women, but ordinary women do extraordinary things, and all women's lives are interesting. So we really, in our archives and collecting them, are complementing the collections in the State Library and the National Library, because they collect the well-known figures and so on, whereas we're concentrating much more on collecting the stories of women who haven't appeared in history books. Yeah. And we've got a balcony.
So Shirley, can you tell us the address?
Yes, our main door is at 523 to 525 Harris Street, and if Jan photographs out there, we're directly opposite the new Ian Thorpe Aquatic Centre.
My name's Suzanne Leal, and I'm the author of Border Street, which is this book. It's only recently been published. It was published in August of 2006, and the publisher is Scribe Publications, who are Melbourne-based. It took a while to write this book, for a number of reasons. First of all, because I'm a mum, and I have 3 boys, and in the middle of writing it, I had my last baby, which always takes your creative juices away a little bit because you're so bloody tired. So what started me writing the book, and perhaps I should go back to explain the motivation for it, was in about 1993. My then partner and I moved into a duplex in Tamarama, which is just near Bondi, the next beach over from Bondi. And we were very close to our landlords. In fact, we were just across the courtyard from our landlords. It was a duplex we shared. They're Czech, and they were in their 70s when we moved in. It seemed a really good deal. It was a really cheap rent. It was a fabulous position. So we moved in and basically stayed for 6 years. I became very close to Fred, who was the landlord, and he's quite fascinating. He's a mathematician by trade, by profession, photographic in his memory, surprisingly lacking in confidence for a man of his background, which was wealthy Czech, and given his ability. What I did is that he had a very interesting war story, and I sat down over a year really to talk to him about his life under Nazi occupation in Prague. Of course, and this comes out fairly early in the book, he's Jewish, even though he never identified as being Jewish. And that's very interesting in itself, because he's tall, he's blonde, he's blue-eyed, he speaks German as a first language, and he's not the person you imagine as a victim of the Holocaust, not according to books that I've read. He doesn't identify or didn't identify as being Jewish, and I wanted to see what makes that sort of person tick. As I started to interview him, I started to realise that there's an expectation we have of our victims, particularly victims of such enormous events, that they become suddenly extraordinary people. And I think the person that Fred is a very clever, ordinary person who was faced with an extraordinary event. And I think that's something to remember. And what I tried to do with this book is to evaluate my views and to see whether perhaps we expect a lot of our victims. So what the story is, in effect, is I've made it into a novel. I thought a novel was better than non-fiction because it was less research, and also because I could be freer. I could make up whoever I wanted, and I could make up my own world, which is always fun. I think it's always an escape. So there are two couples, Kate and Cameron, who are the young Australian couple, and Frank and Vera, who are the Czech couple. And the story marks the progression of their relationship, each of their relationships really, and in particular the relationship between Kate and Fred. And it's the Prague wartime story that comes out in the context of this. So it's been fun. It's been really fun writing it. Difficult and long, and you have to be pedantic, and you have to go over it and time again. Hard to find time, but when you do find time, I think very rewarding.
So, were you a born writer?
Yeah, born writer. I think I had it beaten out of me at university. I wrote a lot at school. I liked writing, and I had a couple of primary school teachers who really supported that and supported me. But really, I think I stopped at the end of high school because I started to study German and French literature. And I had so many lecturers who were telling us how the great classical writers hadn't quite got it right, and I thought, well, you know, what chance is there for me if they can't do it?
Suzanne, someone once said to me that being a mother makes a creative woman even more creative, because you have to be so creative in how you work your timetable. So it's amazing that you wrote this book with 3 little boys. How did you do it?
I guess so practically. Look, I think that's true. I think sometimes when you have a little bit of time, that's the most valuable thing, rather than having a lot of time. I think people who have a little bit of time, in my experience, use it. It's a bit like having a little bit of lemon juice. You squeeze every last drop out because you really need it. Whereas if you've got everything in the world, then you waste it or you drop it. Practically, I probably started writing when my first child was born, when Alex was born, because I thought I was supposed to be this child prodigy writer, and I wasn't. I turned 30 just about, and I thought, better get going, better get started. So I started writing during his sleeps, but you're so exhausted. I don't know what the quality was like, but I think what it did, it started me with a structure. And I think that's what you need. I think it doesn't matter how much time, it's just the fact that you take some time, preferably regular time, and just keep it going. Lately what I've been doing is getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, which seems horrific, but it's good time, it's quiet time, it's peaceful time. I have a garage to write in, so I can generally get 2 hours until the baby's voice comes through the monitor, and then I can just throw him a bottle sometimes at about 6:30, and then I can start again. I really do think the key to efficiency is wanting to do it. I mean, being passionate about it. I think if you want something enough, you manage the time. I think the other thing too for a lot of women is that you got to acknowledge the help that you get. I don't think it's possible to do it just on your own. I think people who say they do are lying. That's maybe a little bit harsh, but my mother helps mind the baby. I have good childcare. I have good after-school care for the kids. My former partner has them every second weekend, so that's actually freed up an enormous amount of time, surprisingly. I mean, although there are swings and roundabouts to all that.
So if anyone would like to buy a copy of Border Street, what would they do?
If you'd like to buy a copy of Border Street, it's in most bookshops, and it's by me, Suzanne Leal, and it's published by Scribe Publications.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Jane.
Anyway, there is a lot of work for us to do, and I know so many of us are in our own way doing as much as we possibly can. For myself, because I'm an American taxpayer and always will be, because that's where my income is generated, and once Uncle Sam's got you, he doesn't let go. However, I do have control over whether or not my money goes to buy bullets and bombs, and that is by earning as little as I possibly can. I walk as lightly on the planet as I can. I live a very frugal lifestyle. I practice pro bono as a clinical hypnotherapist. I don't have a car. I travel by public transport. I do eat out. But if you'd ever tasted my cooking, you'd understand. Some people can sing, more people can cook. That's the way I look at it. Anyway, I don't know how much time I've taken up already, but I would like to get some questions if anybody has a scintillating question. Yes, ma'am.
Wait a moment, I'll give you the microphone.
That's all right, I can repeat it, I can hear it.
Do you ride a bicycle?
Do I ride a bicycle? I used to, but I have a plate and 8 screws holding my right ankle together from the last time I rode a bicycle. A three-wheeler, well, that's a thought. I'll look into that one. Thank you. Come on, people.
Is there a question?
Yes.
Come on. Here you are, ask a question.
Don't be shy.
I don't know. I was going to ask you what inspired you to write this song, I Am Woman.
Good girl. Very good.
Well, at that time, I'd been a woman for about 30 years. And certainly experienced a lot of what that involved, particularly in those days. I mean, I was one of the first women to have a mortgage in my own name. And I had to really fight for that because I was pregnant. And good heavens, I couldn't possibly pay a mortgage if I was pregnant, but I was the breadwinner in the family, and ultimately they had to cave in. And there was no point in, putting the mortgage in someone else's name when he wasn't the one who was making the contributions financially. So ultimately I got that. I got a credit card in my own name, and women now don't have to worry about those sort of things. They just have to worry about some of these privatised banks ripping them off. You said that. Yes, back there.
Do you want me to yell? Yes! Roar!
Where do you see?
She was doing a very good job.
As a young girl / woman of my generation, I have a few concerns.
Okay.
Especially about the objectification of women in the media all the time and the image of women
Yes.
at the moment, e.g. Paris Hilton. Where is feminism in your opinion today?
Well, feminism today is sitting here in this room. A lot of it. But I do share your concerns. We did in the 1970s, we made tremendous gains both in legislation and media images, a lot of things. In the 1980s, that all got turned on its head, and so much of our gains were lost. And I do blame, in terms of the media and the images in the media, I have to blame Madonna. Because I'm sorry, but I don't see going from Iron Woman to Material Girl as a positive progression.
I have a question. I've this week just seen An Inconvenient Truth.
Yes.
Which I think that I commend everyone here to see that.
Yes, I haven't, but I'm going to.
Well, we're seeing. Well, I was going to ask you, you haven't seen it, but you must have heard from America what kind of an impact it's had on the two countries that haven't, our country one and the US that haven't signed the Kyoto protocols. Have you had any feedback? Has it made any difference? Because it's a film that I believe should make a difference.
Well, yes, it's being. I heard several people in the United States saying that the wrong people were seeing it because they already, got the message. But I read Al Gore's book before he ran for vice president. He wrote a wonderful book about the environment. I thought it was very well researched, very thoughtfully written, and I voted for him as vice president because of it. I think the message it's so important. It's so important. I had a meeting at my house in the Hollywood Hills on Earth Day 1970. Now that's 36 years ago now. I'm trying to get people interested in the environment, and for a while they were. There was a lot of legislation that was passed in the 1970s. Tax incentives for using alternative energy, that kind of thing. When Reagan came in, it all got wiped, all of it. So, we've got a big enemy to fight, and that's big oil and big arms manufacturers and the people who are interested in maintaining the status quo. But we have to remember there's a lot more of us than there are of them.